question slipped out of him without planning, the kind that rises from exhaustion rather than courage, and the fluorescent lights above the checkout lane suddenly felt too bright for a man who hadn't slept more than 4 hours in weeks. Michael stood there gripping the edge of the counter as if it were the last solid thing in his life. Groceries lined up like small reminders of everything he was trying and failing to keep together. The cashier, a young woman named Sarah, paused with the receipt half-printed, her eyes lifting from the screen, and in that quiet second, the store seemed to hold its breath. What if this were you, standing there with too much weight in your chest and not enough words to explain it? What if all you had left was one question, asked to a stranger, because there was no one else? Michael had once been the kind of man who planned years ahead. He worked construction in Ohio, paid his bills on time, and believed that if you showed up every day and loved your family, things would work out.
Then his wife passed away suddenly from an illness that didn't give warnings or second chances, leaving him alone with a 6-year-old son named Jacob and a silence that pressed against the walls of their small apartment. Nights became the hardest. Jacob would fall asleep clutching his mother's old sweater, and Michael would sit on the edge of the bed listening to his son's breathing, wondering how to be two parents when he barely felt like one person anymore. Bills stacked up, work hours were cut, and grocery shopping turned into a careful math problem where every item had to earn its place. That afternoon, Michael had stood in the store debating whether to put back the cereal Jacob loved, the one with the bright box and too much sugar, because it cost $1 more than the plain kind. His phone buzzed with a missed call from his son's school about a field trip payment he hadn't made yet, and something inside him cracked just enough to let the words escape when he reached the register. He asked Sarah in a voice that barely carried how people were supposed to keep going when they felt like they were failing their kids every single day. It wasn't a speech or a dramatic confession, just one tired question that carried months of unspoken fear. If you were him, would you have asked it or swallowed it down like all the others? Sarah had been working that register for 2 years, saving money while caring for her own mother who was battling cancer. She had learned to smile through sore feet and quiet grief, scanning items while life unfolded around her in fragments. When she looked at Michael, she didn't see a customer slowing her line. She saw a man standing at the edge of something heavy and dark. She answered him without rushing, her voice calm, steady, and full of a truth that felt older than her years. She told him that failing would have meant not showing up at all, that standing there buying groceries for his child meant he was still fighting, even if it didn't feel heroic. She reminded him that children remember love far longer than they remember struggle, and that some days survival itself was an act of devotion. Her words weren't loud or polished, but they landed with a force that made Michael's hands tremble. Something shifted in that moment, not dramatically, not like in the movies, but enough to loosen the knot in his chest. Michael paid for his groceries with exact change, the receipt warm in his hand, and walked out into the parking lot feeling lighter than he had in months. The sky was gray, the kind that promised rain, but for the first time he noticed it instead of just moving beneath it. At home, he poured Jacob a bowl of the cereal he had almost put back, and watched his son's face light up in a way that made his chest ache and swell at the same time. Later that night, when Jacob asked about his mom like he sometimes did, Michael didn't freeze. He talked, gently, honestly, and when his son fell asleep, the silence didn't feel quite as cruel. Days passed, then weeks, and life remained difficult, but it no longer felt impossible. Michael picked up extra shifts, learned to cook simple meals, and started leaving notes in Jacob's lunchbox. Small reminders that he was loved even when money was tight.
He found himself thinking often about Sarah, about how a stranger's kindness had met him at exactly the right moment. One afternoon, he returned to the store with a handwritten thank you card and a bag of groceries he could finally afford without counting every dollar twice. Sarah accepted it with tears in her eyes, not because of the card, but because she understood what it meant for someone to come back standing a little taller. Years later, Jacob would remember his childhood not as a time of lack, but as a time of closeness. He would remember late-night talks, shared laughter over simple meals, and a father who never gave up, even when the world felt heavy. Michael would sometimes tell him that strength didn't always look like confidence or certainty, that sometimes it looked like asking for help in unexpected places.
And if you were listening closely, you might recognize yourself in that truth. Wondering how many moments like that you've passed by, how many questions went unasked. Before this story ends, take a moment and tell us in the comments if you've ever been changed by a stranger's kindness, or if you were once that stranger for someone else. If this story truly touched your heart, please consider liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing, because sometimes the smallest moments deserve to be carried a little further.